Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we dig into company documents to give you the real story. Today we are dissecting Quantum Corporation's latest proxy statement, and let me tell you, there is a lot to unpack. Think leadership changes, big financial deals, and a whole lot of stock going around. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and join our Discord community linked below for more insider talk after this. First off, this is a preliminary proxy statement with a filing fee of no fee required. Quantum Corporation is holding its annual shareholder meeting, and they are laying out all the proposals they want shareholders to vote on. It is basically a guide for how shareholders should cast their votes. The company is introducing its new president and chief executive officer, Hugues Merith. He really emphasizes that Quantum has fantastic products, amazing people, and fascinating customers. He feels like it is fate he is back at Quantum, having been associated with them since the 1990s. He is passionate about driving the company toward future opportunities in unstructured data and AI-enabled workflows. They believe shareholder support on these proposals will help them grow and deliver consistent results. Then we hear from Don Jaworski, the chairman of the board, who is also very excited about Hugues Merith joining. He speaks about Quantum revising its product portfolio and go-to-market strategies, and how fiscal year 2026 presents an opportunity to leverage past work and define a future that can deliver positive outcomes for all stakeholders. He recommends supporting the proxy proposals as a critical step in Quantum's transformation. The meeting is virtual and you need to pre-register to attend. They are asking shareholders to vote on 8 proposals. These include electing directors, issuing common stock related to debt exchanges and convertible notes, approving stock under warrant anti-dilution provisions, amending their long-term incentive plan, a non-binding vote on executive compensation, ratifying their independent auditors, and finally approving the adjournment of the meeting if needed. The board strongly recommends it for vote on all these proposals. This section gives us the rundown on the people who want to be directors. We have Donald J. Jaworski, the chairman of the board, with a background in software and cloud data management, previously CEO of SwiftStack, which was acquired by NVIDIA. Then Hugues Merith, the new president and CEO with extensive experience in technology, networking and data storage, and was even a previous Quantum employee. UA Joe Emily White has a background in enterprise data and analytics from companies like Cisco and Nike. John R. Tracy is an independent director nominee with a lot of financial planning and operations experience. Most recently CFO at Verifone Systems, John A. Fickthorne. Also an independent director nominee, has experience in alternative investments and managing investment firms. James C. Clancy, another independent director nominee, brings sales strategy experience in data protection solutions from Dell Technologies. And finally, Tony J. Blevins, an independent director nominee, has significant supply chain leadership and strategy experience, most recently as Vice President of Procurement at Apple. The board met 34 times in fiscal 2025. All current members except Mr. Merith are considered independent directors, and they exceed NASDAQ listing standards by having about 75% independent directors. The good news here is that they are prioritizing independent oversight. The company has also separated the roles of board chair and CEO. With Mr. Jaworski now serving as chairman and Mr. Merith as CEO, this move is seen as a strengthener for corporate governance. We see the breakdown of board committee responsibilities. The audit committee oversees financial reporting and internal controls. The leadership and compensation committee handles executive pay and human capital strategy. The Corporate Governance and Nominating Committee identifies director nominees and develops governance principles. There was also a special committee formed to review and approve debt and capital structure negotiations with Dialectic Capital LLC. The Corporate Governance and Nominating Committee has strict criteria for selecting directors. They look for independence, integrity, qualifications that boost board effectiveness, and diverse backgrounds. They also specifically weigh current board size, composition, performance needs, and a candidate's prior experience on public company boards or in senior management. They also consider knowledge of information technology and any conflicts of interest. They are also making an effort to consider diversity of knowledge, culture, race, gender, and age in their candidate pools. Shareholders can also recommend candidates, but they need to provide a lot of details. Quantum conducts business ethically and honestly, following all applicable laws. They have a code of conduct for everyone representing the company, covering mutual respect, professionalism, and accountability. They also have an ethics committee and encourage reporting of concerns through a confidential hotline. Quantum recognizes ESG as an important part of its business strategy and has been working to improve its carbon footprint data. The Corporate Governance and Nominating Committee oversees ESG initiatives, including human capital management like recruiting, retention, learning and development, performance management, rewards and recognition, and succession planning. The Audit Committee primarily oversees the company's management of financial, strategic, operational, and regulatory risks. Other committees also oversee risks within their areas like compensation policies and compliance. Management is responsible for actual risk management, with the internal audit team leading enterprise risk management practices. The board and its committees conduct annual self-evaluations to ensure they are strategic, productive, and effective. Directors are expected to hold stock worth 5 times their annual retainer, the CEO 3 times their base salary, and the CFO 2 times their base salary. These guidelines are meant to align leadership interests with shareholder interests. All reported positions were on track to meet these guidelines at the end of fiscal 2025. The compensation for non-employee directors is decided by the board, with input from the LCC and an independent consultant. For fiscal 2025, directors received retainers and committee fees. The company also updated its program to include separate fees for service on the new special committee and revised the annual equity grant to a fixed number of shares. Looking at the compensation tables, directors had various cash retainers and stock awards. For example, Donald J. Jaworski earned $103,125 in cash and received stock awards valued at $82,080. Hugh Gesmerith received $90,000 in cash and stock awards valued at $82,080. It is important to note that some directors had partial years of service and their compensation reflects that. This is where shareholders vote to elect 7 directors. The nominees are Donald J. Jaworski, Hugh Gesmerith, Yua Zhou, Emily White, John R. Tracy, John R. Figthorne, James C. Clancy, and Tony J. Blevins. This is an uncontested election, meaning a majority of votes cast for a director is needed for election. This is a big one. Quantum is restructuring its debt and wants to issue senior secured convertible notes to Dialectic Technology SPV LLC in exchange for outstanding term loans. This is aimed at improving their balance sheet and liquidity. They have faced financial difficulties, including needing waivers from lenders for covenant breaches. If this proposal is not approved, it could put the company's ability to continue as a going concern in doubt. Dialectic's investment advisor, John Figthorne, is also a director, which the company acknowledges as a related party transaction. The special committee, comprised of independent directors, evaluated and approved the transaction, as did the audit committee. The board unanimously approved it, with Mr. Figthorne abstaining from discussion and voting. The convertible notes will mature in 3 years with a 10% interest rate compounded annually. There is a potential for significant dilution to existing shareholders, but the board believes this is necessary for financial strength. If approved, Dialectic will receive convertible notes in exchange for about $52 million in term loans. This could lead to Dialectic holding a substantial percentage of Quantum's common stock, potentially up to 38.1% immediately after the closing, considering the conversion of notes and exercise of warrants. If the proposal isn't approved, the company faces a real risk of not being able to repay its debts, potentially impacting its ability to continue operating. This proposal authorizes the company to issue more convertible notes to Dialectic if they cannot raise enough capital through other means. This is another measure to ensure they meet their financial needs. The potential dilution to existing shareholders remains a concern, but again, the board sees it as necessary for financial flexibility. This proposal is about issuing more shares under a warrant to Dialectic to maintain certain anti-dilution protections. This is a situation where if the stock price drops, Dialectic might get more shares to keep their investment protected. Again, shareholder approval is needed to ensure compliance with NASDAQ rules. The company is seeking approval for situations where they might issue more shares under the warrant to protect Dialectic's anti-dilution rights. This is directly tied to NASDAQ's 20% rule, requiring shareholder approval if a significant amount of stock is issued. Quantum wants to increase the number of shares reserved for its long-term incentive plan by 1.4 million shares and remove individual award limits. This is to help attract and retain top talent, especially with recent leadership changes and the need to manage cash flow. They are exploring compensating their chief restructuring officer partially in equity. This is crucial for their retention strategy and to avoid increasing cash compensation, which would hurt operations. The plan includes good governance features like prohibitions against liberal share recycling, clawback provisions, no tax gross-ups, and requires shareholder approval for additional shares. It also has a provision for the leadership and compensation committee's independence. The plan allows for various types of awards, including stock options, restricted stock units, and performance awards. It is administered by the board or a committee. They are requesting an additional share reserve to meet future needs, and it is estimated this will cover a year's worth of grants, with the intention of annual shareholder requests for more shares in the future. If approved, directors will receive an annual grant of 12,000 restricted stock units. There are also new higher equity awards committed for Hugues Marath, the new CEO. Additionally, about 425,000 shares are earmarked for promised awards to recently hired and promoted employees. This is the say on pay vote. Shareholders get to express their opinion on how the named executive officers are compensated. While the vote is non-binding, the board takes it seriously. They believe their compensation program is performance-based and aligned with shareholder interests. The adoption of this resolution requires a majority of votes cast. Abstentions count as a vote against. Quantum is asking shareholders to ratify the appointment of Conresnick LLP as their independent registered public accounting firm for fiscal 2026. They've had a couple of auditor changes recently with Armanino LLP and then Grant Thornton LLP before this appointment. The Audit Committee oversees this process. Ratifying Conresnick's appointment requires a majority of the shares present and entitled to vote. This proposal gives the board the option to adjourn the meeting if needed, especially if there aren't enough votes to approve certain proposals. This is a strategic move to allow more time to solicit votes. Approval requires a majority of shares present and entitled to vote. This section lists the key executives for fiscal 2025. It highlights significant leadership changes in early fiscal 2026, including new CFOs and the appointment of Hugues Marath as CEO with the termination of James J. Lerner. Now for the juicy financial details looking at fiscal 2025, James J. Lerner, the former president and CEO, had a total compensation of $1,493,653. Kenneth P. Janela, former CFO, had $1,048,729. And Brian E. Cabrera, former Cal, had $987,373. It is important to note that these figures include salaries, bonuses, stock awards, and other compensation. The bonuses paid in fiscal 2025 include chip payouts earned in fiscal 2024 and retention bonuses paid in April and October 2024. The company's executive compensation philosophy is to pay for performance, aiming to attract, retain, reward, and motivate top talent while aligning executive and shareholder interests. Compensation includes base salary, variable cash incentives tied to corporate goals, and long-term equity grants. The Quantum Incentive Plan, or KEEP, is their short-term incentive program. For fiscal 2025, the performance metrics were essentially tied to achieving net adjusted EBITDA targets. Unfortunately, none of the target levels were met, meaning no cheap payments were made for fiscal 2025. Annual equity grants typically consist of time-based restricted stock units and performance-based restricted stock units. For fiscal 2025, the grants were larger than historical practice due to concerns about retaining key management during financial restructuring. The performance metrics for SAS were adjusted EBITDA and Myriad revenue. However, the adjusted EBITDA target of $12.0 million was not achieved, leading to the cancellation of related grants. Due to concerns about retaining key executives, retention bonuses were approved for Messrs. Lerner, Janela, and Cabrera in both fiscal 2024 and fiscal 2025. These bonuses were subject to clawback provisions if the executive resigned or was terminated for misconduct. This table shows the outstanding restricted stock unit awards for the named executive officers as of the 31st of March 2025. For Mr. Lerner, there are various outstanding sus and sus amounting to a significant number of shares with a market value based on a closing stock price of $14.38. The same applies to Mr. Janela and Mr. Cabrera, showing their equity holdings. The company has employment and change of control agreements with its executives. In the event of an involuntary termination related to a change of control, the CEO receives 1.5 times salary plus bonus, and other executives receive 1.0 times salary plus bonus. Equity awards would also vest. For involuntary terminations outside of a change of control, executives receive a lump sum cash payment equivalent to 6 to 12 months of their base salary and 6 to 12 months COBRA reimbursement. This section is pretty interesting. It shows how executive compensation actually paid compares to company performance. For 2025, the CEO's compensation actually paid was $2,199,487, significantly higher than his summary compensation table, total of $1,496,653. For non-POs, the average compensation actually paid was $1,533,120, also higher than their summary compensation total. This suggests a disconnect between reported compensation and how much was actually realized, perhaps due to stock awards that vested or changed value. Notice how company TSR has been quite volatile, with a huge jump in 2021 and a massive drop in 2022. Here we see a visual representation of the pay versus performance. The graph shows that while compensation actually paid has fluctuated, total shareholder return has been even more erratic, particularly the sharp decline in 2022 and steep rise in 2021. This graph compares compensation actually paid to the company's stock price over the years. The stock price also shows considerable volatility, with a peak in 2021 and a significant drop in 2022 before recovering somewhat. The audit committee oversees the company's financial reporting and internal controls. They reviewed the fiscal 2025 audited financial statements with management and discussed them with the independent registered public accounting firm. They have concluded that the statements were prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. For fiscal 2025, Grant Thornton LLP billed $3,261,400 in audit fees and $477,000 for audit. Related fees for fiscal 2024, audit fees were $3,296,540. The company is asking shareholders to ratify Conresnick LLP as their independent auditor for fiscal 2026. This section details transactions involving related parties. A significant one is the June 2023 amendment to a term loan agreement with entities managed by PIMCO, where Christopher D. Newmeyer, a former director, was an executive vice president and portfolio manager. Another is the debt exchange and additional notes issuance involving Dialectic Technology, SPV LLC, where John Fickthorn, a current director, is the managing partner of Dialectic Capital Management. These transactions were reviewed and approved by the Audit Committee and the Special Committee. All directors and executive officers complied with Section 16. Our reporting requirements in fiscal 2025, except for a slight delay in filing Mr. Fickthorn's initial ownership report. This covers the logistics of voting. Shareholders of record on the record date are entitled to vote. You can vote via internet, telephone, or mail. If your shares are held in street name, you need to follow your broker's instructions. Voting for directors allows for cumulative voting, meaning you can distribute your votes among nominees. Quantum is sending proxy materials electronically to save resources and is offering to householding for shareholders at the same address. They will bear the costs of soliciting proxies and have engaged Alliance Advisors LLC to assist with this. Shareholders can submit proposals for next year's meeting. There are strict deadlines for submitting proposals to be included in the proxy materials, generally around January 2026 for inclusion and with advance notice required for proposals not included. This is a standard disclaimer that many statements in the document are predictions about the future and actual results could differ due to various risks. They mention risks like not getting shareholder approval for the proposed transactions, potential litigation, disruptions to current business, and macroeconomic conditions. This is the full text of the amended incentive plan. It details the purpose, definitions, and terms of awards like stock options, restricted stock units, and performance awards. It also outlines the share reserve, administration, and other provisions. The goal of this plan is to attract, retain, and incentivize talented individuals and promote the company's business success by offering various stock-based awards. This section simply defines all the important terms used in the plan, like administrator, affiliate, award, board, and change in control. This part is about the total number of shares that can be issued under the plan. It talks about the maximum number of shares that can be issued and rules about shares coming back into the pool, like if an option expires. This describes who runs the plan, the board, or a committee. It gives them the power to select who gets awards, decide the terms, and interpret the plan. It specifies who can receive awards and sets limits for awards granted to outside directors in a fiscal year to prevent excessive compensation. This covers the details of stock options, including their term, exercise price, how they can be paid for, and what happens if a participant's employment ends or they die. It also mentions the ISO limit and no reload options. This explains awards of restricted stock, which are shares that may be subject to vesting conditions. Holders have voting rights, and dividends are paid out like regular shares, but are subject to forfeiture if vesting conditions aren't met. ARSAs represent the right to receive shares or cash in the future. Holders don't have voting rights until shares are issued. Dividend equivalent rights might be included, and these are subject to the same restrictions as the ARSAs. SARs give participants the right to receive an amount based on the increase in the company's stock price above a certain exercise price. Payment can be in cash, shares, or a combination. These awards are earned if performance goals are met. The administrator sets these goals, which can be based on company-wide achievements or individual performance. This section covers how leaves of absence or transfers between company locations affect award vesting, generally pausing it during unpaid leaves. Awards are generally not transferable, except by will or laws of descent and distribution, unless the administrator approves specific transfers for estate planning. In case of stock splits, mergers, or other corporate changes, the number of shares and exercise prices under the plan will be adjusted to prevent dilution or enlargement of benefits. If the company dissolves, outstanding awards will terminate unless they are exercised or vested before the transaction closes. In the event of a merger or change in control, outstanding awards may be assumed by the successor company or fully vested. For outside directors, service termination after an assumption or substitution triggers full vesting and exercisability. This outlines the tax obligations related to awards, including withholding requirements and various payment methods to satisfy these obligations. It is crucial to note that the company is not responsible for any taxes imposed due to Section 409A of the Code. This covers miscellaneous terms of the plan, like electronic delivery of documents, the fact that the plan does not affect employment status, and how the plan is interpreted. The plan is effective the 25th of July 2023 and remains in effect until its 10th anniversary unless terminated earlier. The administrator can amend or terminate the plan, but participant rights generally cannot be materially impaired without their consent. However, there are exceptions for things like tax compliance or legal requirements. This section details legal compliance requirements for issuing shares and may require participants to make investment representations. All awards are subject to clawback provisions in case of certain events, like misconduct or violations of company policy. The plan requires stockholder approval within 12 months of adoption. This is the practical part for shareholders on how to cast their votes. You can vote online by phone or by mail. It clearly states the deadlines and how to vote if your shares are held in street name versus recorded on the books. This is the board's direct recommendation for Proposal 1, the election of directors. This is the board's strong recommendation to approve the debt exchange, emphasizing compliance with NASDAQ rules. Here again, the board is urging a vote for the issuance of additional notes, also to meet NASDAQ requirements and ensure financial flexibility. Another important recommendation to vote for the issuance of excess shares under the warrant, again highlighting adherence to NASDAQ rules and protecting anti-dilution provisions. The board is strongly encouraging a vote on amending and restating the long-term incentive plan, crucial for attracting and retaining talent. Here we have the board's recommendation for the say-on-pay proposal, asking shareholders to approve the executive's compensation. The board is recommending a full vote to ratify the appointment of Conresnick LLP as the company's auditor for the upcoming fiscal year. Finally, the board recommends voting for the adjournment proposal, which gives them flexibility if additional votes are needed for key proposals. As of the 31st of March 2025, there were 580,966 shares to be issued upon exercise of outstanding options and settlement of restricted stock options with a weighted average exercise price of 0 since there were no outstanding options. There were 318,457 shares remaining available for future issuance under equity compensation plans. As of the 7th of October 2025, with 13,399,093 shares outstanding, Dialectic Technology SPV LLC holds 16.5% of the shares, mainly due to a forbearance warrant. Among the named executive officers and directors, their ownership percentages are all less than 1%. This shows Dialectic has a significant stake. This table shows a pretty interesting picture. For fiscal 2025, the CEO's compensation actually paid was $2,199,487, while the company's total shareholder return was only 23%. For non-payos, the average compensation actually paid was $1,533,120, with a TSR of 23%. In fiscal 2022, The CEO's compensation was a whopping $2,526,902, but the company's TSR was negative $2,063,248, showing a clear disconnect between pay and performance during that year at least. Let's look at how a $100 investment would have performed. Starting in fiscal 2021, an investment would have grown to over $9 million by fiscal 2025, a truly impressive return. However, in fiscal 2022, that same investment would have plummeted to negative $2 million, highlighting extreme volatility. The audit committee has reviewed and discussed the fiscal 2025 financial statements with management and the independent auditors. They recommended these statements be filed with the CC. For fiscal 2025, audit fees were $3,261,400 and audit-related fees were $477,000. For fiscal 2024, audit fees were $3,296,540. These fees seem substantial, reflecting the company's efforts to ensure accurate financial reporting. We saw a debt refinancing involving PIMCO, where a former director was associated, and the current debt exchange with Dialectic, where a current director is associated. These are considered related party transactions and were subject to review and approval by the Audit Committee and Special Committee. This section lays out the deadlines for shareholders to submit proposals for the 2026 annual meeting. For inclusion in proxy materials, proposals need to be in by around January 2026, and there are specific timelines for shareholder-nominated directors as well. This particular filing really shines a spotlight on the pay versus performance aspect. It illustrates how executive compensation, especially when factoring in option values and stock awards, can sometimes diverge from the actual shareholder return. While the company has had periods of strong stock performance, like in 2021, it has also experienced severe downturns, as seen in 2022. This volatility in shareholder return, coupled with significant executive compensation packages, begs the question of how effectively the compensation structure is truly aligned with long-term shareholder value creation. The charts here paint a vivid picture. Notice how compensation actually paid to executives has remained relatively high, even during periods of negative total shareholder return, like in 2022. While there was a massive surge in TSR in 2021, the compensation levels did not consistently mirror these extreme swings, suggesting that equity awards and other compensation components might smooth out the immediate relationship between annual pay and market performance. Similar to the TSR comparison, this graph shows the stock price's journey alongside executive compensation actually paid. The stock price's high volatility with significant peaks and troughs is evident. The compensation, while also fluctuating, appears somewhat less sensitive to these dramatic price movements, especially when considering the accounting valuation of equity awards. Finally, the net income graph shows a very different story. Net income has been consistently negative for most of these years, dipping further into the red in fiscal 2022. This strongly contrasts with the compensation actually paid to executives, which has remained substantial. This raises a significant question about the performance metrics used to justify executive compensation when the core profitability of the company has been so weak. So, what is my take on Quantum Corporation's latest filing? Well, they are clearly in a period of significant transition. The leadership changes and focus on restructuring debt are aimed at long-term survival and growth. The proposed debt exchange and convertible note issuance are critical for strengthening their balance sheet, though the potential dilution to existing shareholders is a major concern. The company's financial performance, particularly its net income, has been concerning for several years. And this latest filing doesn't paint a picture of immediate profitability. The massive fluctuations in stock price also highlight the inherent risks. However, the large shareholder return in 2021 and the significant potential of their business in areas like AI and unstructured data could be very attractive if they can navigate these financial challenges. The disconnect between executive pay and the company's actual financial performance, especially net income, is something shareholders should definitely be watching closely. The new leadership has big shoes to fill, and the success of their strategies will be key in the coming years. Alright, that is our deep dive into Quantum Corporation's proxy statement. What are your thoughts on these proposals and the company's direction? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this analysis valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe for more essential corporate breakdowns. And don't forget to join our Discord community linked in the description to keep the conversation going. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.